Welcome back to the cryptowrld channel, everyone. My name is Josh, and right now, Bitcoin is getting close to confirming a new signal in the short term as the price is now retesting a critical level on the price chart. And in less than 24 hours from now, we have new CPI inflation numbers being released, which could heavily affect the market in the short term. So I'll be talking about that in just a moment, alongside Ethereum, which is now starting to bounce from this important Fibonacci level, while the price of Solana is also getting closer towards confirming a new signal in the short term, while the price of XRP is now bouncing from this very important area of support. So I'll be talking about all of that and more later in the video, so definitely watch to the end. First of all, just before we take a look at the Bitcoin charts today, we need to take a look at the upcoming CPI inflation numbers that will be released in less than 24 hours from now. In fact, these new numbers will be released at exactly 12:30 p.m. in the GMT time zone on the 12th of March. So once again, less than 24 hours from now, and you can use that to work out with your own time zone. Once again, 12:30 p.m. GMT. And as always, I will be tweeting these new numbers out as soon as they get released in real time over on my Twitter or X, link down below if you want to get extra real-time updates from time to time, just like these new numbers right here. But essentially, these numbers can affect the market in the short term, depending on what the numbers actually are. And as of right now, everyone is expecting the new CPI inflation number to come in at 2.9% year-over-year inflation. And so, of course, this is a slight drop from the current 3% year-over-year inflation, which is the current inflation rate before the new number gets released. But basically, essentially, with a lot of people expecting 2.9%, that means if we end up getting the 2.9% number, that's neutral for markets. That's not really overly bullish or bearish. But if we see anything other than the 2.9% number, that is where we could start seeing a little bit more volatility in the market when the number gets released. And basically, the further away from 2.9% we get, the more volatility we'll likely see. And all you really need to know is the lower the number comes in at. So if it comes in below 2.9%, that is considered bullish for markets. And if it comes in above 2.9%, that's considered bearish for markets. But once again, if it's only 2.8% or 3%, so 3.0, essentially that's still somewhat neutral. It's pretty close to expectations. But if, for example, we see 2.5% or in the lower 2% area, or let's just say 3.5% or the higher 3% area, that could be very good or bad. Obviously, once again, lower is good, higher is bad. And in case you're wondering, the reason behind why this is bullish or bearish is because if inflation comes in below expectations, that means the Federal Reserve might have to start cutting rates sooner than expected, or cutting rates more than expected, perhaps later in the year. But then on the other hand, if inflation comes in much higher than expected, the Federal Reserve will have to keep rates higher for longer, interest rates higher for longer, which is bearish for markets. And as of right now, the next FOMC meeting, also known as a Fed meeting, where the next interest rate decision actually happens, is in roughly around a week from now, a bit over a week from now. And the current expectations, based on what the market is expecting, is essentially the Federal Reserve keeping interest rates the same at the next Fed meeting. And so there's currently a 97% chance of no change in interest rates and only a 3% chance of an interest rate cut, at least at the next Fed meeting in about a week from now. But remember, depending on what this inflation number comes in at, that can potentially change these probabilities right here, these expectations, and especially future expectations for future Fed meetings further later in the year. And so, for example, the market is currently expecting 3 interest rate cuts in 2025, 3 25 basis point rate cuts, which basically means overall reducing interest rates or reducing the Fed funds rate by 0.75% during 2025. That is what the market is currently pricing in and expecting. And basically between now and then, throughout this year, depending on what the inflation numbers come in at, that can slowly change these probabilities, these future expectations, and the repricing of these expectations either towards the upside or towards the downside, that is what affects the markets. And so once again, just a real quick recap, lower than 2.9% is bullish, higher than 2.9% bearish. The further away from 2.9%, the more volatility. And once again, I will be releasing this number as soon as it gets released, basically over on my Twitter within a matter of seconds from the number being released over on my Twitter link below. But with that being said, taking a look at the US stock market, just before getting into the Bitcoin charts today, this is the NASDAQ 100 index on the daily time frame. And we can see, obviously, we've had quite a drop recently in the stock market. In fact, this is the largest drop that we've seen in the US stock market in almost 1 year. The last time we saw a drop of this size was around mid-2024, around July 2024. And we have also just now confirmed an oversold signal in the daily RSI for the NASDAQ 100 index. And the last time we got close to oversold, once again, was around the beginning of August after that July dump last year. And the time before that was back during around April 2024. As we can see, we saw a dump during around April 2024 and we hit almost oversold territories. We basically brushed against oversold territories before seeing a bounce. And so just keep this in mind, at least based on this oversold signal, this is telling us that we might be due to see finally a bit of a bounce sometime soon in order to reset the RSI here. And in fact, if we do not see a decent little relief sometime soon, things could likely get a lot worse, because obviously the last couple of times we got close to oversold, we did see finally a bounce and a recovery out of these major dumps in the stock market. And so if we don't see some sort of recovery or at least a bit of a relief in the short term at some point over the next week, give or take, then essentially that's the market telling us that things could likely get a lot worse. I'm talking about a possible longer term bear market or recession, but at least based on what we've seen once again in the last 1 year approximately, this signal is telling us that it is quite likely that we're going to see a bit of a relief, some sort of bounce sometime soon in the coming days, or most likely over the next week, give or take. And that's very important to consider when it comes to the crypto market. That's why I'm covering the stock market here on this crypto channel, because as I always say, crypto is highly correlated to the stock market. Not a perfect correlation, but if the stock market has a major dump, crypto will also likely have a major dump, and vice versa. If the stock market is booming, usually that is bullish for crypto. And so with that being said, getting into the Bitcoin price charts today, looking at the 4-day time frame, obviously, as I mentioned in my last video here on the channel, we've just now officially confirmed a bearish signal here in the super trend indicator on the 4-day time frame. And usually when we confirm a bearish signal in this indicator, that is obviously bearish for the price of Bitcoin. And if we're taking a look at this weekly Bitcoin chart, we obviously still have this massive bearish crossover playing out in the weekly Bitcoin MACD. And so overall, despite seeing little bounces here and there in the short term, overall, technically, we are looking more bearish than we are bullish, as I've been saying for over a month now, based on this signal right here, telling us that we could likely see either a pullback or a larger bearish trend over the coming weeks or months, based on the last couple of times we saw this signal confirm. And obviously, this has already been playing out very nicely over the last 1 to 1.5 months. And if we're taking a look at this weekly Bitcoin chart, obviously, we still have a massive bearish divergence to pay attention to, with massive higher highs in the price in the candle closes and significant lower highs confirmed in the weekly Bitcoin RSI. And so this is yet another signal on the larger timeframes here, telling us we should not necessarily expect a significant amount of bullish momentum towards the upside really anytime soon. But as I say over and over again here on the channel, of course, we can see some bounces here and there in the short term, especially from oversold signals and important support levels and things like that. Yes, we can see some bullish price action here and there, but not necessarily a lot of sustained momentum towards the upside, like for example what we saw back here. I'd not necessarily expect that, at least anytime soon. And just before getting into some other very important Bitcoin price charts today, first, if you want to actually trade any of these moves in the price of Bitcoin or any other crypto, personally, I'm starting to take more of my crypto trades over on 2bit, so I'll make sure to leave a link to 2bit below this video in the description and in the pinned comment. And if you use that link, it'll take you to this page right here, where you can claim some massive trading bonuses, like for example, up to a brand new Mercedes-Benz or $50,000 in trading rewards, simply just by trading crypto using that link. But if you're not one of these larger traders here, you can still claim some decent bonuses using the link below this video, like for example, a $30 sign up bonus using that link, or up to a 20% deposit rebate up to a max of 200 USDT. So for example, if you deposit just $1,000, you get a $200 bonus onto your new account. And on top of all of that, if you use the link below this video, you're automatically upgraded to VIP level 1 trading fees, which basically means you get a massive discount on trading fees, lowered trading fees over on 2bit, but once again, only if you use that link. So if you're going to be trading crypto anyway, you might as well check this out. Once again, first link below this video. And also, in case you're wondering, 2bit is a no KYC exchange, which means you can access it from basically any country in the world without needing any KYC. But as always, check your local regulations when it comes to trading crypto. And for whatever reason, if you cannot access 2bit for whatever reason, or if you don't want 2bit, there is also Bitfinex as another exchange out there that I also trade on. So I'll also make sure to leave a link to Bitfinex below this video, where you can also claim some exclusive bonuses using that link. And also, in case you're wondering, Bitfinex is a no KYC exchange as well. But with that being said, taking a look at this daily Bitcoin price chart, and as of recording this video, the price of Bitcoin is retesting and potentially already starting to break out back above this previous Fibonacci level of support, which was acting as a small amount of resistance right here, and that was sitting at around 82 to 83,000. But as of recording this video, we're attempting a breakout back above that level, which is at least a good sign in the short term. And as for support, we do have this 50% retracement level sitting at just under 76,000 as a bit of short-term support, but ultimately the next significant area of support towards the downside, if we continue this drop here, is sitting in between around 70,000 to 74,000. So basically around the low 70k area, low to mid 70k area, that's where the significant support is sitting at based on previous significant resistance becoming new support. And we also have a lot of traded volume in the volume profile indicator sitting in the low 70k area and the high 60k area, also acting as significant support. And as for resistance in the volume profile indicator, we do have a decent amount of resistance at approximately 96,000, give or take. And of course, some people in the short term are starting to front run this area of support. So just keep that in mind. Obviously, we were getting very close towards this area, and basically as the price gets closer towards this area, and as a lot of people out there are focusing more on this area in particular, basically some people out there will start front running that area, which basically means buying into Bitcoin before we even hit that area. And so not financial advice, but just for example, if let's just say I was sitting on no Bitcoin at all and I wanted to accumulate at least some Bitcoin to take advantage of this drop, personally, I'll not necessarily wait all the way until these lower prices just here. Let's just say if I held no Bitcoin, I would already start to accumulate a small amount of Bitcoin around here, around the basically high 70k area, for example, just under 80k, just slowly starting to accumulate, not going all in or anything like that, so that if the price drops a little bit further towards this area, I can accumulate more Bitcoin down there. And so as always, not financial advice, that's just potentially what I would look at doing if I was on no Bitcoin and if I wanted to accumulate some Bitcoin to just get off zero. But obviously I do already hold a lot of Bitcoin from much lower prices. Obviously I've been in Bitcoin for many years now. I do hold Bitcoin from, for example, previous bear market lows. But if we're taking a look at this daily Bitcoin price chart, we're actually getting very close to potentially confirming this new bullish divergence that I've talked about recently here on the channel. Just in my last video, I said we are forming a bullish divergence, which is something to pay attention to on the daily time frame, but it's not yet confirmed. And as of recording this video, like I just said, we're potentially a few hours away from actually confirming this bullish divergence. Essentially, if this daily candle close right here confirms anywhere above around 82 to 83,000, and especially at any higher price above 83,000, basically that will at least be one strong confirmation confirming this bullish divergence with a higher low in place in the daily Bitcoin RSI. And so once we actually see that confirmation confirming the higher low in place, confirming the bullish divergence, in that case, we can finally expect a little bit of a relief from all of this bearish price action. So not necessarily the end of all of the bearish price action, but at least a bit of a relief, just a break from the bearish price action, most likely for 1 to 2 weeks, maybe longer, maybe shorter, but usually around 1 or 2 weeks is what we end up seeing from a bullish divergence on the daily time frame. And so as I always say, the market does not move in a straight line. Obviously, we can see bounces and reliefs along the way towards the downside, just like how during a much larger bullish trend, for example, obviously we could see pullbacks and things like that along the way up. And if we're taking a look at the Bitcoin liquidation heat map, we just recently took out a bunch of liquidity that was sitting at just under 77,000, as we could see right here. So we already wiped out some liquidity there, but we still have more liquidity towards the downside. For example, at around 74,000 74,000 and a lot of liquidity at around 71 to 72,000. And so as always, there's no such thing as a 100% guarantee, but usually, not always, but usually the price of Bitcoin tends to move towards where there's a lot of liquidity. So keep that in mind. If we, for example, confirm this bullish divergence, we might see a little bit of a relief, but then ultimately come back to actually wipe out that liquidity. And also, as I said near the beginning of the video, keep in mind what the actual stock market is doing here. If we see a further recovery in the stock market from this oversold signal, that can really help crypto in the short term. So also keep an eye on that. But with that being said, taking a look at Ethereum on the weekly time frame, and in terms of the larger price structure or the longer term price structure for Ethereum, obviously things are still looking really bad. We've just formed significant lower lows after lower highs and a major breakdown below a multi-year line of support. So not a lot has changed in terms of the larger price structure here on the weekly time frame, despite seeing short-term bounces. But if we're taking a look at this 3-day Ethereum price chart, as of right now, we are currently bouncing from this Fibonacci level of support, which is sitting at approximately 1880, basically just below 1.9k, acting as support. And we did end up seeing the latest 3-day candle close basically within just a matter of dollars, just a few dollars away from that support level. So ultimately, we're still holding on to that level, at least for now. But if, for example, we see a further confirmed break below around 1880, and especially if we actually reject from that level, flipping it into new resistance, in that case, the next significant price target towards the downside would be at approximately 1,500, just above 1.5k. But for now, we are finding support at just under 1.9k once again. And as for the next significant resistance, if we were to see a bit more of a bounce here, I would expect a lot of resistance at this previous golden pocket area of support, flipping into new resistance, sitting in between around 2.1k to 2.2k. And as I always say, Ethereum, along with a lot of the major altcoins out there, will likely follow similar price action to what Bitcoin is doing. Obviously not the exact same price action, but for example, if Bitcoin has a bit of a recovery in the short term or relief or a further dump, expect something similar for Ethereum and a lot of the altcoin market. And with that being said, if we're taking a look at the price of Solana on the weekly time frame, at least for now, obviously we are still looking more bearish than we are bullish on the weekly time frame, with a major price target at approximately $90 per Solana based on this massive bearish rising wedge pattern breaking towards the downside. But at least based on the weekly candle closes here, we are still just holding on to this very important area of support, sitting in between around $120 to $130. So like I've been saying throughout this entire drop just here, yes, we have a price target at around $90, but we cannot ignore support. For example, obviously we can bounce from around this area of support, and so far we are still holding onto this area. So for now, obviously that is still acting as strong support, but if we actually confirm with, for example, candle closes below 120, not just a candle wick, but candle closes below 120, in that case, we can expect that continued drop towards around $90. And while Bitcoin is forming that bullish divergence on the daily time frame, Solana is also forming a similar bullish divergence on the daily Solana chart, with lower lows already confirmed in the price and higher lows potentially forming in the daily Solana RSI. But as I said earlier in the video for Bitcoin, and as I said in my last video just yesterday, we still need to see confirmation. We still need to actually confirm this daily candle close, for example, in the green, ideally 2 candle closes in the green, but at the very least, this candle close needs to confirm in the green on the daily time frame in order to start confirming this higher low in place in the daily RSI. And once we see that confirmation, if we see that confirmation here, then we can finally expect a little bit more of a relief, just a break from all of the bearish price action here, most likely for around 1 to 2 weeks. We should be expecting either a slight bullish relief or just a sideways consolidation, chopping around sideways for, once again, around 1 to 2 weeks, give or take, as the most likely outcome if we first confirm this bullish divergence. But as always, a bullish divergence is not necessarily a bullish trend reversal signal by itself. So for example, if it confirms, we might end up seeing a little bit of a bounce, a relief from this major support here, but then perhaps later on, it is still likely if we continue with this larger bearish momentum here, we can potentially drop down towards these lower price targets at some point later on. So just keep that in mind. And if we're taking a look at the price of XRP on the 3-day time frame, we still have this massive bearish divergence active on the 3-day time frame, telling us we should not really be expecting significant bullish momentum really any anytime soon. And obviously this has already been playing out for quite some time now, for the last couple of months. But of course, as I've also been saying throughout this time period, yes, we can see some short-term bounces here and there. That's very normal to see, especially with the price hitting points of support and oversold signals and things like that. We can see short-term bounces here and there. That is normal to see even during a larger bearish divergence actually playing out. But for now, obviously this larger situation is still not looking too good. But if we're taking a look at the shorter term on the 8-hour time frame, we are currently bouncing from this very important area of support, sitting in between around $1.95 to $2.05. And so like I said in my last video, I'll not necessarily open a new shorts position right now. If you missed that previous little bearish move right here, I'd not necessarily open a new short position right now. I'd first want to see a confirmed break with candle closes below this support for a potential short position trading opportunity. But for now, with the price running into support, obviously there was that chance we could see a bounce from this support like many other times here. And so that is simply what is happening, which is actually good for any XRP bulls out there, because if we were to see a further confirmed break with candle closes below around $1.95, in that situation, that would have been very bad news for XRP. And maybe at some point in the future, that could end up ultimately playing out, because ultimately, if we break below around $1.95, give or take, with candle closes below that level, we could potentially see a further drop down towards around $1.40 to $1.50. So a massive bearish movement. But obviously for now, we are finding support in that area, which is some good news, at least in the short term. And as for resistance, I would expect this previous area of support to become new resistance in between $2.25 to $2.30. And if we can finally see a breakout back above that area, in that case, I would expect significant resistance in between $2.65 to $2.80. And overall, XRP will likely follow somewhat similar price action to Bitcoin. As I always say, if Bitcoin has a recovery or a further dump, expect something similar for XRP. And if we're taking a look at the price of Chainlink on the daily time frame, Chainlink is also bouncing from an important Fibonacci level of support, sitting at approximately 1280. So obviously we did see a recent daily candle close just a few cents below 1280, but still very close to that level. And so obviously with the price quickly getting back above $12.80, at least for now, this is showing that the price is still finding support around that area. But if, for example, we see a further confirmed break below that level, and especially if we flip that into new resistance by actually rejecting from the level like that, then in that case, expect a further move down towards around $10 per Chainlink if we first further confirm that break towards the downside. But despite the fact that we're currently seeing a bit of a short-term bounce at the moment, obviously the larger situation here is still clearly bearish. We're simply within a larger bearish trend, forming lower highs and lower lows, breaking below key support and rejecting from key resistance, which is all bearish price structure. So yes, we can see bounces here and there during a bearish trend, but that does not necessarily change the trend. And as for resistance, if we see a further bounce in the short term, I'll start to expect a lot of resistance in between around $14.50 to $15 approximately, and also significant resistance at around $17.50 to $18 if we actually make it back up there. But once again, if you want to trade any of these moves in the price of any crypto, check out the links below this video to those exchanges if you want to claim those massive bonuses that you can only claim using those links. And if you want to actually know how to trade crypto for yourself, no matter what the price is doing, whether it's bullish, bearish, or chopping around sideways, you can profit from all of that price action by watching these videos popping up right here on your screen. The video in the top left shows you how you can profit from bullish or bearish price action using long positions or short positions, and the video in the bottom left shows you how you can easily profit from choppy sideways price action. But anyway, that is everything that I have to say for today. I really hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next video.